Have you ever opened your inbox and felt your stomach drop? Like 1 second the world is normal, and the next, you're standing on a cliff with the ground crumbling beneath you. That was me on a gray Tuesday morning in Los Angeles. Coffee still steaming on my desk, my cat pawing at the edge of my sketchbook, and there it was, an email that looked like it came from me. Only it didn't. It was filled with insults. Cruel words aimed at one of my biggest clients, words I would never, ever write, yet the address looked like mine. Just one tiny character off, but enough to trick anyone glancing quickly. The client forwarded it to me with a curt message. "If this is how you feel, we're done." My pulse pounded. Years of long nights, endless fittings, begging stylists to take a chance on me, all of it threatened by a single fake email. You think you'd stay calm. You think you'd know what to do. But in that moment, I froze. My hands shook so hard I could barely type a reply. I kept hearing the same thought in my head. This is how careers end. Not with a scandal on TV, not with a lawsuit, but with an email, a few lines of text. I scrambled to explain to the client, but doubt had already seeped in. And that's the thing about doubt. It spreads faster than truth. My phone buzzed with 2 more messages from colleagues asking, "What's going on?" The walls felt like they were closing in. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the email, replaying every interaction I'd had lately. Who could want to sabotage me? Who had the patience to mimic my email address? Who knew enough about my schedule to strike when I was busy preparing for a presentation? And then, like a whisper at the back of my mind, one name surfaced. Lily, my sister-in-law. You probably wonder why I jumped to her so fast. The truth is, Lily had a history, not of crime, but of envy. Little digs at family dinners, snide comments when someone praised my work, the way her eyes flickered whenever someone mentioned my name and the word success in the same sentence. But this was different. This was calculated, malicious. I couldn't prove it yet, but my gut told me she was behind it. The next morning, I plastered on a smile and went to the studio. My team was buzzing about fabric orders and photo shoots, but I felt like a ghost. Every laugh, every word seemed distant. I kept glancing at my phone, waiting for another message, another piece of proof that my career was crumbling. And then, just as I sat down to sketch, another email hit. This one wasn't as bad, but it still carried that mocking tone. And once again, it looked like it came from me. My throat tightened. Whoever was doing this wasn't stopping. They wanted me to fall. I remember looking at myself in the bathroom mirror that day. My eyeliner smudged, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I whispered, "Don't let her win." Because deep down, I knew it was Lily. No one else had that mix of jealousy and proximity. No one else had sat across from me at dinner last week, smirking when my husband toasted my latest show. Still, I had no proof, just suspicion, and suspicion doesn't save reputations. Evidence does, so I made a choice. Instead of reacting, I'd get smarter. Instead of fighting fire with fire, I'd set a trap. Because if Lily was reckless enough to play with my name, maybe she'd be reckless enough to leave fingerprints. That night I created a fake brand, a name that sounded sleek, real enough to be believable. Valora. I whispered it at dinner, dropped it casually in a phone call where I knew Lily was listening. I waited. Days passed. I barely slept. Every ping of my inbox made my chest tighten. But then it happened. Another fake email. Same address, same mocking tone, and there it was, in black and white. Valora. My hand covered my mouth, proof. Not in a courtroom sense, not yet, but enough to know my gut was right. I sat in silence. The city noise muffled through my apartment window. Relief and rage tangled inside me. Relief that I wasn't crazy, rage that she would go this far. I thought about confronting her, about storming into her apartment with the printed email in my hand, But then I stopped. Because sometimes silence is louder, and sometimes letting someone dig their own grave is more powerful than shoving them in it. That night, I shut down my laptop, scribbled sketches until the early hours, and made myself a promise. I wasn't going to crumble. Not over a fake email, not over Lily's envy. If she wanted to play games, I'd let her, but I'd play smarter. And that's how the story really began. With an email that wasn't mine. With fear that almost crushed me. And with a decision to stand still, to breathe, and to wait for the truth to reveal itself. Because here's the thing. You can forge words, but you can't forge consequences. When people look at fashion, they see the lights. The shimmer of sequins, the flash of cameras, the smooth glide of fabric down a runway. But behind every gown, behind every glossy magazine photo, there are nights that feel endless. Nights when you're hunched over a sketch pad with your back screaming, or pricking your fingers raw on fabric swatches you can barely afford. That was my life, long before anyone knew the name Madison. I didn't grow up in luxury. My first sewing machine was secondhand, the kind that rattled every time the pedal hit. I worked in a tiny room, pinning dollar store fabric to mannequins made out of duct tape and broomsticks. I stitched while my friends were out dancing. I lived off instant noodles so I could afford spools of thread in the right colors. Every hem, every dart, every uneven stitch was a step towards something bigger. And when the bigger finally came, when my designs caught the eye of a small boutique in downtown LA, I thought maybe, just maybe, things would get easier. But in truth, success doesn't erase the grind. It multiplies it. Suddenly, I was expected to deliver collections, meet deadlines, juggle press requests, and keep my vision fresh. Sleep became optional, doubt constant. Still, I pushed through, because creating was the only thing that made sense to me. But here's the catch no one tells you. When you rise, the shadows around you grow sharper, and sometimes those shadows look a lot like family. Lily came into my life the way in-laws often do, slowly, then all at once. She was married to my husband's brother, which meant dinners, birthdays, holidays. At first she was polite enough, smiled when we met, asked the usual questions about work. But I noticed things, the way her smile froze when people complimented my dress, the way her voice dipped when she said, "It must be nice, working in something so glamorous." I brushed it off. Families have quirks, right? Not everyone has to love what you do, but the digs grew sharper. Little comments tossed like daggers over mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving. Some people get all the luck. Not everyone has time to play with fabric all day. They were framed as jokes, but I felt the sting. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she looked at me. Like she was measuring me, comparing me, and always coming up short. I tried to be kind. I invited her into my world. I asked if she wanted to come backstage at one of my shows, see the chaos and the beauty up close. She declined with a shrug. Later, she told my mother-in-law, "Fashion isn't real work." Do you know how much it hurts when someone dismisses the very thing you've bled for? When they roll their eyes at the nights you've spent sobbing over a broken zipper, the mornings you've gone to work with barely 2 hours of sleep. It carves something inside you. And though I tried to shrug it off, I carried that weight every time Lily's voice filled a room. Still, I never thought she'd cross the line into sabotage. Annoyance? Yes, jealousy. Probably. But to actively impersonate me, to risk my entire career? That was a shadow I hadn't expected. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the signs. She was always watching me, always listening. At dinners, she'd lean in when I mentioned new clients or upcoming shows. She asked oddly specific questions about my process, my contacts, my schedule. At the time, I thought she was making conversation. Now, I see it for what it was, collecting ammunition. And the truth is, part of me wanted her approval. Maybe that's why I kept trying to bridge the gap. I thought if I showed her the messy side of this industry, the side where you're broke and exhausted, she'd stop seeing me as some shiny success story and start seeing me as human. But envy doesn't work like that. It doesn't shrink when you feed it, it grows. The night after the second fake email, I sat at dinner with my husband's family. My fork pushed peas around my plate, while Lily chattered about a new business idea. She threw glances at me, small smirks like secrets she wasn't sharing. Every time I looked up, she looked away. My skin prickled. No one else noticed. They laughed at her jokes, passed her the gravy, asked about her plans. I wanted to scream, "Don't you see what she's doing? Don't you feel the venom in her voice?" But I stayed quiet, because what evidence did I have? Just an inbox full of poison that looked like mine. And here's the cruelest part. When your enemy wears the face of family, no one wants to believe you. They'd rather believe you're paranoid, dramatic, sensitive. So I carried it alone. I smiled through dessert. I washed dishes with shaking hands. I drove home with my husband beside me, silent, staring out at the LA skyline glittering like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. The city sparkled, but behind that glitter, a shadow followed me, and her name was Lily. I wish I could tell you I didn't care, that her words bounced off me, that her envy was nothing more than background noise. But the truth? It burrowed deep. Every little comment, every look of disdain chipped away at me. And when the fake emails started, it wasn't just about work anymore. It was about survival. Because what's worse than fighting for your career in an industry that eats people alive? Fighting for it while someone you share a table with sharpens the knife behind your back. That was the world I lived in. Sequins on the surface, shadows underneath. And in those shadows, Lily was waiting. Have you ever been so sure of something but terrified no one would believe you? That was me in the days after those fake emails. I knew in my gut it was Lily. Every look, every slip of the tongue at family dinners, every bitter laugh, it all pointed in her direction. But suspicion isn't proof, and in this world, especially in fashion, rumors can kill you faster than any truth can save you. So I decided to stop waiting. I decided to build a trap. I remember sitting at my desk late one night, the glow of my laptop painting shadows across my sketches. My team had gone home. The silence was so heavy, I could hear the hum of the old ceiling fan and the scratch of my pencil when I tapped it against the page. That's when the name came to me. Smooth, sleek, almost too perfect. Valora. Valora wasn't real. It was a phantom brand. A whisper of an idea designed for one purpose, to catch Lily in the act. The next morning, I tested the bait. I dropped the name casually into a phone call with a friend, knowing Lily was in the kitchen nearby, pretending not to listen. "Yeah, I'm exploring this new line under Valora," I said, flipping a magazine page like it was nothing. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her freeze for half a second, a tiny pause. Then she stirred her coffee as if she hadn't heard a word. But I knew she had. That night I repeated the trick. I mentioned Valora over dinner, weaving it into small talk. "I've been sketching for Valora, something more avant-garde, maybe." My husband nodded, uninterested. Lily's eyes flickered just for a moment before she took another sip of wine. Now, all I could do was wait. The waiting was brutal. Every ping of my phone sent a shock down my spine. Days stretched long and restless. I checked my inbox every hour, fingers trembling, stomach tight. Would she take the bait? Would she risk one more move, knowing the spotlight was already hot on her? And then, it happened. It was a Wednesday morning when the new fake email arrived. I'll never forget it. My assistant burst into my office, face pale, holding her tablet like it was a piece of bad news she didn't want to read out loud. "Madison, you need to see this." I grabbed it from her hands, scanning the words. Same mocking tone, same cruel jabs. And there it was, clear as day. Valora. My heart raced. My hands shook. I could barely breathe. She'd done it. She'd fallen right into the trap. For a long moment, I just sat there in silence. Relief washed over me, mixed with fury, proof. Not enough for court, maybe, but enough for me to know beyond a shadow of a doubt I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. Lily was behind it. But the proof cut both ways. It meant this wasn't just a petty sibling rivalry. She had listened. She had tracked me. She was willing to sabotage not only my career, but my identity itself. This wasn't jealousy anymore. It was war. That night, I printed the email and laid it flat on my dining table. The paper trembled in my hands as I stared at the word Valora. It was almost surreal, a fake brand, invented in a whisper, now standing as evidence of betrayal. I thought about storming into Lily's apartment, waving the page in her face, demanding answers. I thought about screaming until the walls shook, until she admitted what she'd done. But then I pictured her denying it, turning the tables, convincing everyone I was unstable. That's the thing about manipulators. They don't need truth on their side. They just need doubt. So I held my tongue. Instead, I chose silence. Silence, but not surrender. Because silence can be louder than shouting. Silence can give someone enough rope to hang themselves. And Lily? She was already tugging at that rope. The next few weeks proved it. I focused on my work, poured myself into sketches, fittings, long nights in the studio. My career surged forward. I was invited to Beverly Hills for a showcase that could change everything. Meanwhile, Lily spiraled, unemployed, desperate, whispering lies to anyone who'd listen. She even tried to pass off pieces of my portfolio as her own to land interviews. Every time I heard about her schemes, I felt that mix again: rage, pity, vindication. She thought she was clever. She thought she could wear my skin like a costume. But the cracks were showing, and soon the world would see what I already knew. Still, I kept Valora close. I never told anyone about the trap. To this day, no one in my family knows that word was my secret weapon, my silent witness. Because sometimes the smartest thing you can do isn't to fight. It's to watch, to let the truth collect itself like rain in a glass, drop by drop, until it's undeniable. Looking back, that was the turning point. The moment I shifted from victim to strategist. The moment I stopped reacting and started leading the game. Valora was never meant to exist, but in the end, it gave me something priceless. Clarity. And clarity, when you're surrounded by shadows, can feel like the brightest light in the world. Silence can be sharp. It can sting worse than any shouted word. After Valora exposed Lily, after I finally had proof in my own hands, I thought I'd feel relief. And I did. Briefly. But then came the question, what now? Do I call her out? Do I tell my husband? Do I risk fracturing the family forever? I chose silence. That choice wasn't weakness. It was survival. Because every instinct screamed that if I confronted her, she'd deny it. She'd twist the story, make me look like the unstable one. I'd seen her do it before. A snide comment at dinner, then a laugh. "Oh, you're too sensitive," a rumor whispered, then shrugged away. I never said that. No, if I played her game, I'd lose. But if I let her keep playing hers, eventually, she'd run out of moves. So I buried the Valora email deep in my files and turned back to the work that had saved me countless times before. Design. The studio became my sanctuary again. Bolts of fabric lined the walls, colors stacked like secrets waiting to be told. My team noticed a shift in me. I wasn't shrinking anymore. I was sharper, steadier, channeling every ounce of fury and fear into the lines of a sketch. There's something about creation. It gives pain a purpose. And just as I poured myself into work, opportunities began to bloom. Invitations to private fittings, calls from stylists, whispers that my next collection might land on magazine covers. Then came the biggest one yet, a spot in a Beverly Hills showcase, the kind of event that could open international doors. The night I got the call, I cried. Not because I felt triumphant, but because for once, I felt like maybe the universe was giving me back what Lily tried to steal. But while I climbed, she fell. Word spread quietly. Lily had lost her job. She was scrambling, sending out resumes, whispering to contacts that she was developing her own line. At first, I didn't care. She could reinvent herself however she wanted. But then the stories started to twist. A friend in the industry called me one evening. "Madison, did you know Lily applied here? She used sketches that look an awful lot like yours." My chest tightened. I asked them to send a copy. When the email arrived, my heart sank. Pages of designs, barely altered, some lifted almost line for line from my portfolio. She hadn't even bothered to hide it well. It felt surreal, seeing my work in her name, like someone had broken into my diary and read my most private thoughts out loud. Rage surged, but I kept still. If I exposed her, the family would fracture. If I stayed quiet, she'd eventually hang herself on her own lies. So again, I chose silence. At family gatherings, the tension grew. Lily's laughter was a little too loud, her smiles a little too forced. She dropped hints about exciting projects coming her way. Carefully watching my face for a reaction, I gave her none. That drove her mad. Inside, though, I burned. There's a unique pain in pretending everything's fine when the person across the table is actively trying to erase you. The clink of silverware, the chatter of relatives, the warmth of candles, all of it blurred into static as I locked eyes with her fake grin. She thought I was weak. She thought my silence was surrender. But in truth, my silence was strategy. I wasn't ignoring her. I was documenting, waiting, letting her stack the evidence against herself. Meanwhile, the showcase loomed closer. Every day was chaos. Fittings, late nights, models dropping out, fabrics arriving late. But it was the kind of chaos I craved, the kind that made me feel alive. I poured my soul into every stitch, knowing this was my chance to show the world not just who I was, but that I was unbreakable. And Lily? She kept spiraling. I heard whispers of her showing up to interviews, name-dropping me, even claiming we were collaborating. People started to doubt her, and doubt, once it seeps in, spreads like wildfire. By the time the Beverly Hills showcase arrived, I was exhausted but ready. My designs hung backstage, shimmering under the lights, waiting for their moment. I smoothed the hem of one gown, breathing deep, steadying myself, because I knew this wasn't just a showcase of fabric. It was a showcase of truth. And Lily? She was somewhere in the crowd, circling like a shadow, waiting for her chance to strike again. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I knew the silence wouldn't last forever. Sometimes silence speaks louder. But sometimes it sets the stage for the loudest exposure of all. The night of the Beverly Hills showcase felt electric. The city itself seemed to buzz. Palms swayed in the evening breeze. Neon lights washed the streets in color, and the hills glittered like a necklace against the dark. I dreamed about nights like this when I was sewing in that tiny apartment, eating noodles and sketching until my fingers cramped. Now it was real. My collection hung backstage, shimmering under stage lights, and the room beyond was filling with editors, buyers, and celebrities. But with every heartbeat, I felt another kind of pressure, because I knew Lily was out there. Somewhere in that sea of sequins and champagne glasses, she was watching, and if she wasn't, then she would hear about it soon enough. Either way, tonight wasn't just about dresses. It was about survival. Backstage was chaos in the best way. Models rushing in and out of fitting rooms, assistants carrying garment bags like precious cargo, the air thick with hairspray and nerves. I checked every hem, every zipper, smoothing fabric with hands that shook just enough to betray me. "Breathe," I whispered to myself over and over. Then the music started, low, pulsing, building like a heartbeat. The first model stepped onto the runway, and the crowd fell into a hush that only fashion can create. That quiet anticipation before fabric meets spotlight. My designs moved, alive, each gown carrying a piece of me. The applause grew, camera flashes popped, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope. But then, chaos. Halfway through the show, whispers rippled through the front row. Heads turned, brows furrowed. I peeked out from behind the curtain and my blood ran cold, Lily. She wasn't just sitting there, she was standing, holding a portfolio, speaking loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "This design," she said, flipping pages, "is mine. She stole it." Gasps cut through the music. Photographers swiveled their lenses. Models froze for a fraction of a second before continuing, trained to keep walking no matter what. But the damage was done. A ripple of confusion spread across the room. I stumbled backward, heart racing. This was her plan. Not just fake emails, not just stolen sketches whispered into interviews. This was public, loud, strategic. She wanted to humiliate me in front of the very people whose approval kept my career alive. My assistant rushed to me, panic in her eyes. "What do we do?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I didn't know. The show continued, but all I could hear was Lily's voice, cutting through the music, dripping with venom. "Look closely. These lines, these details, they're mine." Part of me wanted to storm out, to drag her from the room, to scream the truth until my throat bled. But another part of me, the part that had learned to wait, to watch, to let silence do its work, held me still. And then it happened. One of the buyers, a woman from Paris I'd admired for years, stepped forward. She held Lily's portfolio, flipping through the pages, then looking at the gowns gliding down the runway. Her face was unreadable, my chest ached. Then, slowly, she turned to Lily and said, clear enough for the room to hear, "These sketches are copies, crude ones." The room shifted. Heads turned again, this time toward Lily. The buyer continued, "I've seen Madison's work evolve. This," she tapped the portfolio, "is imitation, nothing more." Lily froze. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no sound came. Security moved closer. Whispers turned into stares, sharp and unforgiving. In that moment, Lily's mask slipped. The confident smirk vanished, replaced by panic. She clutched the portfolio to her chest like a shield, but it was too late. The audience had seen enough. The music swelled, the final model walked, and the applause rose. Not polite, not hesitant, but thunderous for me. For the work I had built with my own hands. Security escorted Lily out quietly, though nothing about it felt quiet. Every eye followed her. Every camera caught it. And just like that, her public attempt at exposure became her own downfall. Backstage, I collapsed into a chair, shaking so hard I could barely hold a glass of water. My assistant hugged me, whispering, "You did it." But the truth is, I hadn't done anything. I hadn't needed to. Lily had exposed herself. Later that night, when the runway was cleared and the applause faded, I walked outside into the cool Beverly Hills air. My husband found me leaning against a wall, staring up at the sky. He asked if I was okay. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe it. But all I could manage was, "It's not over." Because even as Lily was escorted out, even as her plan crumbled, I saw it in her eyes. This wasn't defeat. It was fuel. She would come back. She would find another way, and I was right. But that night, for a brief, shimmering moment, silence spoke louder. I hadn't shouted, hadn't fought. I'd stood still while the truth revealed itself. And in the end, the truth was enough. I'll never forget the way the city looked as I drove home. Glittering, endless, alive. My designs had walked Beverly Hills, my name had been cheered, and the shadow that followed me had stumbled. For once, I let myself breathe. For once, I let myself believe in justice. Because sometimes you don't have to fight the fire. Sometimes you just have to let it burn itself out. After Beverly Hills, I thought I'd finally earned peace. The applause still echoed in my ears for days. Industry blogs praised the collection, photos of my gowns swirled across Instagram, and for the first time, buyers from Paris and Milan reached out directly. It was everything I had worked for, everything I had starved and stitched and sacrificed to reach. But peace doesn't last when someone is determined to destroy you. The morning it began, I woke up to a text from one of my biggest clients. "Is this really how you treat your buyers?" Confused, I clicked the link attached. My heart nearly stopped. It was my brand's official Instagram page, but the captions under my designs weren't mine. They were vile. Insults aimed at customers, mocking their bodies, belittling their taste, and they were signed with my name. For a moment, the room spun. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the feed. Post after post poisoned. Hundreds of comments piling up, some furious, some confused, others gleeful at the drama. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages. "What's going on, Madison?" "This is disappointing." Unfollowed. I ran to my laptop, logged into the account, but the password had been changed. Panic surged through me. Whoever did this had locked me out of my own brand, my own identity. I called my assistant. Her voice cracked through the phone. "It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, even blogs are reposting it. We've already lost followers, thousands." The calm I'd felt after the showcase shattered like glass. All that progress, all that hard work, and with a few keystrokes it was slipping through my fingers. And deep down I knew. I didn't even have to guess. This wasn't a random hacker. This wasn't some faceless troll. This was Lily. It was her handwriting all over again. Not literal, but familiar. The tone, the cruelty, the timing. She'd watched me stand tall in Beverly Hills. She'd watched me win. And when her public attempt failed, she slithered into the digital shadows where she thought I couldn't touch her. But I could feel her. I sat in my office that afternoon, blinds drawn, staring at the screen while my team scrambled to control the damage. "We can release a statement," someone suggested. "We can tell people you were hacked." But my chest tightened at the thought. Because here's the problem. Once people see your name attached to ugliness, the stain lingers. Even if you shout, "It wasn't me," some will never believe you. And in fashion, image is everything. The hours dragged on. Every minute we didn't have control of the account, another storm brewed online. Screenshots spread like wildfire, faster than truth could catch up. By evening, exhaustion hit. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face looked pale, drawn, my eyes hollow, and the thought returned, heavy and sharp. "She won't stop until I'm ruined," I wanted to scream. To drive to her apartment and pound on the door, to demand why. But then I remembered Beverly Hills. I remembered Valora. I remembered what silence had done before. Still, silence felt dangerous now. This wasn't whispered sabotage or a stolen sketch tucked into a portfolio. This was public, loud, viral. That night, I barely slept. Every vibration of my phone jolted me awake. Every ping of a new notification sent my heart racing. By dawn, I knew this wasn't something I could fix with statements or silence. This was bigger. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called the police. Not just any police. Cybercrime specialists. I handed them screenshots, IP traces, every clue I had. When I mentioned Lily's name, the officer raised an eyebrow. "Family?" "Yes," I whispered, my throat dry. He shook his head slowly, like he'd seen this before. "Family can be the worst." As I left the station, the city felt different. The streets were still buzzing, but to me, everything was edged in gray. I'd built a life on beauty, on creation, on things that made people feel alive. And now, that life was being attacked with words typed in the dark. It was the calm before another storm. Only this time, the storm wasn't waiting to break. It was already here, swirling above me, threatening to sweep away everything I'd fought for. And I knew Lily was smiling somewhere, thinking she'd finally found the way to bring me down. But storms, like lies, always pass. And when they do, the truth has a way of shining through the wreckage. When you've been wronged in silence for too long, there comes a point when you can't just stand still anymore. The fake emails, the stolen sketches, the sabotage at Beverly Hills, the hacked Instagram, all of it had pushed me to the edge. And this time, there was no hiding. If Lily wanted to drag me into the public eye, then fine. I would meet her there. The courtroom wasn't glamorous. Forget red carpets or spotlights. It smelled faintly of dust and old paper. The walls were bare, the benches hard. Yet, when I walked in, dressed in a simple black suit, I felt like I was stepping onto the most important runway of my life. Every eye turned, not for the cut of my jacket, but for the weight of the case. Across the aisle sat Lily. She wore confidence like perfume, thick, suffocating, meant to mask the rot beneath. She smirked as our eyes met, as if to say, "You'll never prove it." But I wasn't the same woman who once froze at the sight of a fake email. I carried Valora in my back pocket. I carried screenshots of Instagram posts, IP traces from the cybercrime team, witness statements from buyers she'd tried to con. The judge called us to order. My lawyer spoke first, laying out the timeline like a thread pulled through fabric. The first fake email, the suspicious comments, the portfolio theft, the showcase sabotage, the hacked account. Each event stacked neatly on the other, a pattern impossible to ignore. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The evidence. The Valora email flashed on the screen. Gasps rippled through the room. My lawyer explained how the brand didn't exist, how I'd whispered it only in Lily's presence, how it had surfaced in a fake message days later. Lily's face flickered. Just for a second, her smirk cracked. Next, the cybercrime officer took the stand. He detailed the IP addresses tied to the hacked Instagram account, all of them traced back to Lily's apartment. He spoke with precision, every word a nail sealing her coffin. Lily tried to laugh it off. When it was her turn, she raised her voice, painting herself as the victim. "She's obsessed with me. She's jealous. She made all this up." But her words rang hollow. The evidence outweighed her noise. And then, in the quiet that followed, my lawyer dropped the final stitch. A witness statement from a recruiter Lily had approached, presenting my stolen sketches as her own. The recruiter sat there calm, steady, pointing to Lily with no hesitation. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, Lily's shoulders slumped. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape that wasn't there. She wasn't the predator anymore. She was cornered prey. The judge delivered the ruling swiftly. Lily was found guilty of defamation, identity fraud, and attempted sabotage. She was ordered to pay damages, barred from contacting me or my clients. The gavel struck, final and cold. But to me, it sounded like applause. I didn't cheer, I didn't smirk, I simply breathed. For the first time in months, I inhaled without the weight of suspicion pressing on my chest. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, microphones flashing like camera bulbs. "Madison, how do you feel?" one shouted. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I feel free, because that's what it was. Freedom from the shadow that had haunted every dinner, every fitting, every runway. Freedom from the silence I'd carried, waiting for truth to bloom. That night, I sat in my studio alone. The fabrics around me glowed in the lamplight, colors brighter than they'd ever seemed before. My phone buzzed with congratulations, clients reaffirming their loyalty, friends sending love. But I didn't need validation anymore. The truth had spoken for itself. Lily had unmasked herself. I'd only held up the mirror, and as I ran my hands over the silk of my newest gown, I realized something. Revenge hadn't come from shouting or striking back. It had come from patience, from letting her write her own downfall, one reckless act at a time. In the end, the courtroom wasn't just where Lily was exposed. It was where I reclaimed my voice. The trial was over, but life doesn't hand you neat endings tied up with ribbons. It doesn't fade to black after the gavel strikes. When I walked out of that courtroom, yes, I was free from Lily's shadow in a legal sense. But emotionally, the damage lingered. I remember the first night after the verdict. I sat in my living room with the curtains half closed, sipping cold tea I'd forgotten to drink hours earlier. My husband tried to celebrate, ordering takeout, pouring wine, telling me, "It's done, you won." But inside, I felt hollow. Winning doesn't erase the scars, because the truth is, Lily had taken something I couldn't get back: trust, safety. The feeling that family was supposed to mean comfort, not daggers in the dark. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, half expecting another fake message. Every time I posted online, I hesitated, wondering if someone would twist my words. I kept working, because work had always been my anchor. But even in the studio, surrounded by fabric and sketches, I felt shadows. When an assistant hesitated before answering a question, I caught myself thinking, are they doubting me too? When a client asked for reassurance, my stomach twisted, fearing Lily's poison had left a stain I couldn't see. That's the hidden cost of betrayal. It doesn't just attack your career, it rewires your mind. And yet, slowly, piece by piece, I began to rebuild. First came the apology emails. Clients who had doubted me during the storm wrote back, admitting they'd been wrong. Some even doubled their orders as a way of showing loyalty. Reading those words felt like a balm on wounds I hadn't realized were still bleeding. Then came the press. Fashion blogs spun the story, not as a scandal, but as a triumph. Designer survives sabotage, emerges stronger. They painted me as resilient, a survivor in an industry known for its cutthroat nature. At first, I cringed at the word survivor. But maybe that's what I was. And then came the family. Oh, the family. At the next gathering, the room felt heavy. Conversations dropped when I walked in. Eyes flicked toward me, then away. My mother-in-law pulled me aside, whispering, "We didn't know. We never imagined." Her voice trailed off, guilt thick in the air. I nodded, but inside I thought, you didn't want to imagine. Because imagining meant acknowledging the venom right at the table. It meant choosing sides. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired of pretending family equaled safety. Tired of carrying the burden of their silence. That night, I ate quietly, smiled when spoken to, and left early. For the first time, I realized I didn't owe them my presence. The real healing didn't happen at family dinners or in press headlines. It happened in small moments. The first time I laughed freely with my team again. The first time I pulled fabric over a mannequin and felt joy instead of dread. The first time I posted a design online without second-guessing whether it would be weaponized against me. Each moment was a piece of myself returning. And in those moments, I learned something important. Survival isn't just about withstanding storms. It's about choosing who gets to stand beside you when the sky clears. I couldn't control Lily. I couldn't undo the emails or the sabotage, but I could control where I poured my energy. And I chose to pour it back into the work, the people, and the dreams that had carried me this far. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't just a designer. I was a woman who had been tested, broken, and rebuilt stronger. And that realization was worth more than any verdict. People think justice ends in the courtroom, that once the gavel strikes, the story is over. But I learned quickly that justice is just the beginning. What comes after? That's survival. That's healing. In the weeks following Lily's exposure, the air around me shifted. Some family members stopped calling, unsure what to say. Others tried to bridge the silence with awkward messages. "We're proud of you. You showed such strength." Their words landed like pebbles tossed into an ocean. I didn't need praise. I needed peace. And peace, I realized, required boundaries. For years, I had tolerated Lily's digs because I thought that's what you do with family. You swallow the comments, brush off the envy, laugh at the insults dressed as jokes. But tolerance had cost me dearly. It had almost cost me my career, so I drew a line. The next time my husband's family invited us over, I said no, not with anger, not with explanation, just no. My husband hesitated, torn between loyalty to them and loyalty to me. I looked him in the eyes and said, "I can't keep bleeding at a table that pretends it's about love." He nodded. For the first time, I knew he understood. Saying no was terrifying. It felt like stepping off a cliff. But it was also freeing, because every no to them was a yes to myself. A yes to late night sketching without dread. A yes to waking up without my stomach in knots. A yes to reclaiming the joy that had been buried under Lily's shadow. But healing wasn't just about boundaries. It was about confronting the scars Lily left behind. I started therapy. At first, I resisted. I thought therapy was for people who couldn't handle their lives, and I'd survived enough to prove I was strong. But strength, my therapist reminded me, isn't about carrying everything alone. It's about knowing when to set things down. In her office, I unpacked years of silence, the fake emails, the stolen sketches, the humiliation in Beverly Hills, the hacked account. Each memory still stung, but speaking them out loud took away their poison. She helped me see that Lily's actions weren't a reflection of my worth. They were reflections of her emptiness. Week by week, I rebuilt myself. My confidence didn't return in a roar. It returned in whispers. In the first time I laughed without forcing it. In the first time I trusted my own reflection again. In the first time I realized I could post online without fearing the worst. And something else happened too. My work deepened. Pain has a way of carving new layers inside you, and when you pour those layers into art, people feel it. My next collection wasn't just fabric. It was a story stitched into silken sequins. A story of survival, of shadows confronted, of beauty born from brokenness. When it walked the runway in New York 6 months later, the crowd didn't just applaud. They rose to their feet. Critics wrote about the raw emotion woven into the designs, the way every piece carried both fragility and strength. And for the first time, I believed them. Healing also meant forgiveness, but not the kind people expect. I didn't forgive Lily in the sense of absolution. I forgave her in the sense of release. I let go of the grip her name had on my chest. I stopped replaying her smirk in my mind. I stopped wasting nights wondering why. Some questions don't deserve answers. I'll never welcome her back into my life. That boundary is permanent. But by releasing her from my mind, I released myself too. One night, months later, I sat alone in my studio. The city lights blinked outside, my sketches scattered across the desk, and it hit me. I wasn't waiting for the next attack anymore. I wasn't bracing for betrayal. I was simply existing, creating, breathing. That, more than any courtroom victory, was healing. Boundaries gave me space. Therapy gave me tools. Forgiveness gave me freedom. And from that freedom came the truest form of revenge. Not Lily's destruction, but my survival. Not her collapse, but my rise. Because in the end, the story wasn't about what she took. It was about what I reclaimed. Some endings don't come with fireworks. They come quietly, like the soft close of a door you know you'll never open again. That's how it felt. Months after the courtroom, months after therapy, months after I had built the boundaries that saved me. Lily was no longer part of my life. Not in dinners, not in whispers, not in sabotage. She was simply gone. But the absence of her shadow left me with something else. Space. With that space, I asked myself questions I'd been too afraid to face. Who am I without this fight? What does it mean to build when no one is tearing you down? And what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind, not just in fabric and fashion, but in life? The answers came slowly. They came in the quiet hours of the night, when I sketched with no deadline pressing. They came in the laughter of my team, who no longer looked at me with worry, but with admiration. They came in the emails from clients, not asking if I was okay, but celebrating the strength they saw in the work I created. I realized that survival had shifted me. I wasn't just a designer anymore. I was a storyteller. Every stitch was a sentence, every hem a paragraph, every gown a chapter. And the story I was telling wasn't about Lily. It was about resilience, about choosing light even when someone tried to bury me in shadows. Closure, I learned, isn't about waiting for an apology that never comes. It's about deciding the story ends here. It's about refusing to carry someone else's poison into tomorrow. So I closed the door on Lily, not with bitterness, not with vengeance, but with resolve. She had written her chapters in my life, ugly and cruel, but they were finished. I was the author now, and with that choice, legacy became clear. I began mentoring young designers, the kind of dreamers I once was. Hungry, broke, stitching late into the night with calloused fingers and wide eyes. I told them the truth, that the industry was brutal, that betrayal could come from anywhere, even across the dinner table. But I also told them this: no one can take away your voice if you refuse to stop speaking. One of my students asked me once, "How did you survive?" I paused, remembering every sleepless night, every trembling hand, every silence I had held until the truth revealed itself. And I said, by remembering who I was, even when someone tried to erase me, that's my legacy. Not gowns and glass cases, not magazine covers or runway shows, but the reminder that survival is art too, that resilience can be stitched, worn, carried like armor. In the quiet of my studio now, I look at the mannequins dressed in colors that once lived only in my dreams, and I feel something I haven't felt in years: peace. Not fragile peace that trembles under threat, but solid peace built brick by brick, choice by choice. And maybe that's the truest ending. Not revenge in flames, not vindication shouted from rooftops, but a quiet life reclaimed. A future written in my own hand. Lily's name no longer burns in my chest. It's a footnote, a reminder of how far I've come. My story isn't hers anymore. It's mine, entirely mine. And as I press needle to fabric, starting another design, I know this truth. You can survive betrayal. You can survive sabotage. You can even survive family turned enemy. What matters is what you do afterward, because the real victory isn't that they fall. The real victory is that you rise.